Yes, guys, welcome back to another stream as we find out how Manchester City won the UEFA Super Cup and we're talking tactics. And today I'm very happy to say I'm joined by Sam, owner of the American Citizens Twitter account. For me, honestly, guys, it's one of the best Twitter accounts out there. If you want to be getting sort of tactical information and just a lot of that sort of stuff, data, all that kind of stuff, you need to be following him. So big up to American Citizen Sam. It's also 5:30 in the morning where he is, man. So the guy's getting up early to help us out with this one. Big up, Sam. Thank you very much for coming on, man. How are you doing?
Good. Just got my coffee, ready to go.
Yeah, man. Listen, guys, there's going to be loads of people watching this video back on replay later on. I want you to spam in the comments your appreciation for Sam getting up at 5:30 to help us do this. First of all, City, UEFA Super Cup winners, Sam. I mean, it's not the biggest trophy in the world, but I don't know if you knew, but you get more money for winning that trophy last night than you do the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup combined, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, nice to win another trophy, isn't it? That's 4 we're currently holding.
Yeah, it's like the Community Shield where it only matters if you win it. Yeah. And if you don't win it, then it just doesn't matter. It's a glorified friendly, so it matters. It's a good trophy.
I know, 100%. Guys, before we get into it, make sure you do drop a like on the stream, subscribe to the channel, and again, go and check out Citizen America, American Citizen on Twitter. That's Sam for all your sort of tactical information. It's really, really good account. I've really rated it. The threads are crazy. Right, I want to get straight into it because I've got a few questions for Sam and obviously for the chat and just have a bit of a general discussion. We both have access to this system, by the way, guys. So I'm just going to do it first and then Sam can jump in. But I've got a few questions for you, Sam, because I don't know about you, and obviously we've not actually spoke about this off air before we came live, but my personal opinion is I don't know how I felt last night. I know we might not see it a lot, but I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't know how I felt about Ake at centre back last night, Gvardiol at left back. And now I know obviously Gvardiol is going to be playing in this position when Diaz and Stones probably come back into the side, but I don't know. For me personally, I felt like if we was going to run this back four again, I felt that this might have been a better option. Now, the reason I say that is just because when Ake got the ball in this sort of central position where I put Gvardiol, I just don't feel he had the confidence to sort of play riskier passes into sort of Kovacic, into sort of Foden. And as such, we just kept on giving Gvardiol the ball in this sort of area and sort of put a lot of pressure on him. But what did you make of, first of all, Gvardiol's debut? And sort of what's your thoughts on my take that I prefer to see this?
So I think the reason that Ake was more centrally is because I think Gvardiol's better going forward. So when Gvardiol's out wide, he has a little more license to go forward and kind of combine higher up the field. And Ake's good at it anyway. So so I guess it doesn't. I think it still lends itself to Gvardiol just being a little bit better at that, and Ake, at least now, being a little more solid defensively. Like Gvardiol's only been here for a week and a half, so I think that's probably why just Pep kind of trusts him a little more. I do agree that Ake is not the most expansive of passers, and you want that on your central guy, like in that back three. In the guy in the middle, you're just going to need that to get through the middle. And usually, I doubt that Ake is going to play there often. I think it's just because of the injuries, like because Diaz and Stones are out. That normally either Diaz or Stones or Akanji will play in that middle position, and not Ake. I think it's more of just necessity and Gvardiol just being a little bit better going forward, having to adjust a little more. You'd rather kind of have him out wide and he's probably even a little more athletic than Ake, which is crazy because Ake is crazy athletic. So I think we'll see Gvardiol out wide a lot more than we'll see him centrally.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's just sort of like my thoughts on it from yesterday. Another sort of talking point that I just want to raise before I'll give you the floor, Sam, is Akanji was obviously, because before the game, on the watch along before the game, I was discussing in the pre-match build-up, like, who is going to be the guy to step into midfield? And obviously we discussed whether it might be Gvardiol, and I guess he did play quite advanced, but it was really sort of Akanji who sort of did push into sort of more of a central position. That doesn't mean to say Gvardiol didn't push up. He did, because he quite often we found him in sort of this position here, sort of like getting the ball, Grealish and Rodri. But really, the central guy was Akanji. What did you make of him? And just before I do that, actually, I might be able to bring up. I can. In fact, I think I can. I can bring up Akanji's heat map, which is just here on the right hand side of the screen. That's Akanji's heat map right there. So you can see that he did get into this sort of central position quite a lot. What did you make of Akanji stepping into that midfield last night? I mean, it's not his natural position, and of course, he was never going to do a good job as John Stones. But do you think that if we John Stones does get injured again, we might see Pep opt for Akanji to step in?
Yeah, I think we will, because so I thought he was okay. Obviously, he's not John Stones, right? He got caught on the ball a couple times, which isn't good. But Akanji stepping up there, we're going to have to get used to it, because Stones isn't the best with injuries. We know that. Like, when was the last time we've seen him play a full season? And it's been a while. And, like, I love Stones. Stones might be our best center back, but he can't generally play a full season without picking up some sort of knocks and injuries. And I think even Pep said that before. Like, we need to manage his time. So he's not going to play every 3 days. And so if we want to play this system where somebody from defense has to step up into midfield, right before Akanji, it was either Stones or Rico Lewis. And Rico Lewis isn't playing all the time either. So you need somebody else that can do it. Akanji, I guess, is the natural choice. It might be Gvardiol later because he's so good on the ball, but Akanji's very good on the ball as well. Like, I think that, and even Pep said it last year, he said Akanji is like in the Stones Laporte realm of being good on the ball. And I think we'll see it more. I think he was a little more conservative his first year, kind of grew into that. I think we'll see it more this year. So the more he plays there, the more comfortable he'll be. I think he can play that role, and I think he was okay yesterday.
But that's a fair comment of the more that he does it, the better he'd get, because obviously he would become more comfortable. And I do get that. There was I do feel with Akanji when he come into the team last year, I do feel that like maybe there was an element of fear in the sense of he didn't want to take too many risky passes, and he just sort of and to be honest with you, he probably done the right thing, because it allowed him to really just sort of like just put in some decent performances and then just slowly get better as the season goes on, as he gets more and more confident. And listen, I think that there is a clear gap between the likes of John Stones and Laporte on the ball, and probably Gvardiol on the ball compared to Akanji, but he is still a superior ball playing centre back compared to a lot of centre backs in the Premier League. But it's just a case of whether he can do that. And obviously, there's a lot of the people in the chat who are saying Gvardiol would be the better option, but I just think Gvardiol's going to be playing off the left, and therefore unlikely to be stepping into midfield.
Yeah, he might, but do you really want to put that? Like, Gvardiol just came in the team a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Are you really going to now say, you know what, we're going to have you jump into midfield this early? Probably not. Like, he's going to at least need some time, and then he might step in there one day. It wouldn't surprise me if he did, but give him a little time.
Yeah, no, exactly. Right, I don't know if you want to have the floor, bro, and share you'll need to share your screen again. But I wanna see some variations that we could see this year, maybe in the defensive sort of situation. Just as you're doing that, I'll whack it on screen. Just as you're doing that, big up to King Haaland with the donation. Says 4 trophies this year, getting so buzzing. Yeah, and we could end with the Club World Cup, which would be 5, and then obviously the Carabao Cup, which you don't currently hold, which would be 6. So that would be kind of wild. Appreciate the donation, guys. Make sure you do drop a like on the stream, by the way, if you've not done so already. And we need 2 people to get 50 likes, so hit that thumbs up button and make sure you are subscribed to the channel as well if you are new. Right, okay, Sam, why don't you talk us through maybe some variations that we could see, whatever you wanna take us through, bro. The floor is yours.
All right, so here's a couple of variations that we could see. So here's the kind of base setup that we've had for the last, I don't know, year, 12 months or so, where it's a 3-2-2-3 or
Yeah.
3-2-5, however you want to call it, really, because these positions don't really have names. Like when you say number 8, number 10, it doesn't really matter. Like it matters where they're positioned on the field, right? So we have this back three set up, these two. Now, where I think there can be variations is kind of the midfield at first. So one thing we've seen last year with pressing teams, and even this year with Arsenal and Burnley, is we've kind of moved into a diamond in midfield when that's happened. Something like this, right? And then to help with build-up, you kind of have an extra player in build-up, because if you want to build up from this side, this guy drops down. If you want to have build-up from this side, this guy drops down. So you effectively have more in build-up. And also what it does is for teams that man mark, it creates some space, because then this guy can drop down, then this guy could kind of float over, this guy could float here. So there's a kind of a little more fluidity in midfield. And when teams man mark you, generally what happens is Ederson will step up with the ball, and he'll kind of be that fourth. We've seen it before. Like we've seen other people talk about it. He'll be that fourth center back, and you want to kind of create as many passing lanes for him as possible. So he could dink it out here. He could get here through the lines, and one thing we'll see more against high pressing teams, he'll go over the top to Haaland.
Yeah, we seen that a lot in Burnley, didn't we? When he just kept on going long. Was that do you think the long balls against Burnley was a direct result of pressing, or do you think it was for some other reason?
Yeah, I think it's a direct result of man mark pressing, because he did it a lot last year. If you go back to when we played Arsenal last year, and even the last couple of years against Arsenal, that this is a direct result. Because if you think about it, like if they're man marking you, okay, so you have to kind of find the weaknesses. So if you're in this position and they're man marking you, right? They're generally in a press of a 4-4-2, right? So they're going to have guys pressed up here. Usually they're front three, maybe pressed up on your center backs. And then they're going to have somebody pressed up on your defensive midfielder. And then a couple other midfielders pressed up here, which means a center back is going to have to come and press up on a midfielder somewhere. Whether
And
it's
that
one of
leaves
these three
Haaland.
guys.
Does that also leave Haaland with a one-on-one against his own?
Exactly. So it leaves Haaland one-on-one with one defender, and whether the defender's on the left or the right, but you're going to favor that matchup any day, right? Like, and Burnley, for example, pressed in a 5-2-3, okay, or 3-2-5, whatever, or 3-5-2, 5-2-3, either one, right? So the three pressed up here. There were two in midfield. The wing backs were out here on the winger. So like a defender had to come up here, which means there's space. And you're just going to favor a matchup with Haaland any day. Now, whether Ederson wants to go kind of to Haaland's feet with it and just, straight to his feet, kind of play through the middle here, or whether he wants to go down the channel, that's really effective for trying to beat a man marking system and get up the pitch with it, because it's more about just building up and getting into the third more than it is scoring. But I think teams it's kind of Pep trying to think out of his own system in a way, because like these people are kind of doing Pep's system, or his effect on the league has been so great that he now has to try to beat his own philosophy. So that's what's really interesting about it.
Can I ask you a question? What problems could City encounter either offensively or defensively playing this system at the moment? Of the sort of I like I don't know if you can put the formation back in the sort of default position, but I like the 3-2-2. 3-3-1. Because I like the box in midfield. Whenever I do it in the previews, I always like the 4 box in the midfield. So, what sort of Yeah, that one. What sort of problems could we face this year? Let's start with attacking wise, if we could. What sort of problems could we face this year by playing this system, and how might we be able to overcome those problems?
So I think there's a couple problems we could, and I guess it's somewhat team dependent because
Mm,
you're gonna have. I think just more teams are gonna be bold enough to press City because they're not gonna want City to build up. But
mhm,
then that I think will cause a chain reaction, like we just talked about. That's going to cause City to go over the top more. City score some goals, and people are going to abandon that fairly quickly, and they're going to let City build up, and especially some of the lower teams down the table
That's really
are just
interesting.
going to park the bus.
So just quickly, so what you're predicting almost is that teams have now realised that they cannot allow City to build up from the back because otherwise we'll beat them. So what they're now doing, they're as you said, they're going now for Pep Guardiola's sort of approach of trying to press us all the way back to stop us from building out. But because of the options that we have with Edison, with his phenomenal ball kicking ability, and Erling Haaland, who can win aerial duels, that City will start going long like we did against Burnley. And in the end, should that prevail, which of course over the short to medium term, we still don't know whether that will prevail. But if that does prevail in the short term, then teams might actually abandon sort of pressing us and go back to how they've played against us in the past, which is sort of just sort of like sit back and absorb pressure and maybe just play on the edge of the box. Is that have I understood that right?
Yeah, so it also depends on the team, right? Because
Yeah, of course.
Burnley, they look like the type of team that they're not just because they've been promoted, they're not going to change the way they play.
Mm.
And the top teams aren't either. Like Arsenal's not all of a sudden gonna just park the bus on us, right? But I think the lower half teams, especially when they start having to fight for survival, yeah, they're going to have to because that's the other thing is you have to if you want to man mark City and really press them high up the field, you're going to have to be nearly perfect, right? Because
Mm.
if anyone, especially these guys, if these guys can lose their man, Ederson gets it to him and they are off, right? If they lose their man, then all of a sudden you have these guys running, right? And this guy is usually Phil Foden or Kevin De Bruyne.
Mm.
So you don't want that guy off with the ball.
Mm.
And so I think teams are, like you said, I agree. Like, your assessment of what I said was correct. And I think we're going to see more teams just kind of pack it in defensively because they're going to learn that they can't be that organized
It'll
uh,
be interesting
enough
then
to press us.
yeah, it will be interesting to see then how if we do see this sort of new era of how to play against Pep by pressing him. It'll be interesting to see if that does obviously materialize, and then it will also be interesting to see if City can beat the press if we do start going long, and of course winning football matches, because ultimately the only way that would change is if we start winning football matches. So that'd be super interesting. Is there anything else that you can see from an attacking point of view that could cause City some problems this season with this system?
So I think one thing that could potentially cause City problems is the teams that do park the bus
Mm,
because and I think this is kind of where a potential signing of Jeremy Doku would help a lot. I think he'd be
mm,
really good for teams that do sit back because okay, if you have a team parked in here, you need people who can get behind the defense. Like that's really how you can beat a park bus is you have
mhm,
to find people who can get behind and create a little more space, right? You want your wingers to be able to take their man one on one. Grealish is fine at that, but other than that, you need like Doku's really good at that. And he's really quick, so he can get in behind.
mm,
And then you're gonna need like these guys to start making runs. I think that was the problem we had yesterday.
mm.
Um, is that nobody was making those runs. That's why COVID, and we'll get to Sevilla, but I think that's why they switched in the second half. So I think for those teams, the build-up's not going to be a problem. It's going to be finding the space in the back, and I think Doku would be very good in that. The same way Sane and Sterling were, because in the very beginning um, of Pep Guardiola football, teams just park the bus left and right on us. And their solution is you find Sterling and Sane in behind, and they kind of create a little more space, get that back line moving. So it's good to have the variation, and I think Doku would provide that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think for me, when you're talking about sort of like Doku and the wingers, it's almost as if like when you're playing against a back line that just sits there and sort of packs it out, you kind of need someone who is a little bit chaotic at times. And you know what I mean? And Sterling was that player, Sane was that player. And of course, yes, they do get in behind, but you know, sometimes your Grealishes and your Mahrez, when we had him, they're a little bit too rigid in their approach. And I think I've seen Jeremy Doku on highlights now, watched him at the weekend. And one thing that I would say is that guy's certainly not rigid. He can go on the outside, he can go on the inside. He's a very sort of chaotic type of player. And I think obviously that's sometimes what you need. But yeah, I mean, is there anything else on the attacking other than that, sort of the parking the bus? Obviously Jeremy Doku is going to be clearly key, but anything else? Just quickly, just touch. I don't know if you want to touch on this now or when we come on to the Seville, because before we come on to the Sevilla game, I do want to talk about defensive issues. But you just mentioned then Kovacic and obviously Foden didn't really create too much. In fact, we'll leave that. We'll come on to that maybe when we talk about the Sevilla game. Before we come on to the defense, big up to Blue City Brian. Or is it Blue City Brain or Brian?
Blue City Brain. That's my podcast partner.
I know he is, but I might just start calling him Brain. Yo, this is another guy, man. You two are fucking sick, by the way. This is another guy who puts out them mad sort of, you know, them net spend graphs that he does. I literally send those net spend graphs to all my mates who support other teams and just put, we cannot compete. So keep making those, and big up for the super chat. And how do we get Sam up at 5 a.m? I have no idea, but massively appreciated. Big up to Ferg FIFA says earliest time of the day you've had a Guinness LB. Mate, airport run, 2 a.m, something like that. 3 a.m, something silly. SB says nobody was creative last night, needed stones. And Off Meta Professor says need cover for Rodri, can't play 60 matches again. Imagine if he gets injured too. Well, that's a whole different conversation, Off Meta Professor, but you are correct. Big up for the super chat. Right, Sam, before we come on to the Sevilla sort of tactics and the game, talk to me about what we've just been talking about there, but for the defensive side. Where could this system that we're looking at now catch us out in a defensive point of view? Is it counter-attacks? Is it set pieces? Is it if maybe the midfielder gets caught in if the centre back gets caught in midfield, Gvardiol gets put wide and they get a runner? Give me some examples of how City could be vulnerable defensively with running this system.
So I think the way City would be vulnerable wouldn't really be a result of the system. It would be a result of the players. So really, like, City's defensive vulnerabilities come from a lack of building up correctly. Like, and I know that's weird to say, but like the better the attack, the better the defense. I think that's why we hear so much about why Pep wants to control games, and why he wants to build up kind of slowly and from the back. He doesn't want to make it a basketball game, and that's because the more crisp you build up from the back, the better you are in defense. Because if you think about it, so for example, if you lose the ball here, like if one of these two guys lose the ball, it's a lot easier to counterattack because this guy's wide, and they're not really prepared, and everybody's just kind of scrambling, right? And they might have runners going back. However, if say you lose the ball up here in the box, it's a lot harder for them to counterattack because they're not in the position. They're scrambling. And you are generally more secure when you're down in the final third. Like, everybody's in their position in case something were to happen. And it's just a lot harder to go from here all the way down than from here. So I think that's the biggest thing is the better you build up, the more numbers you have behind the ball, the harder it is for them to counterattack. And I think the vulnerability will be whoever plays next to Rodri. Is probably the biggest. Like that's where we saw it yesterday. The couple times Akanji lost the ball here is when City were vulnerable to a counterattack. I would say other times, because a lot of time yesterday, the vulnerability came down the wing. Because Walker, I feel like Ocampos was just like living out wide.
Yeah, he was.
And
he was hooking the line, wasn't he?
I don't know whether it could have been Walker, but also I think the press in here wasn't as crisp. And it stems from the build-up too. We weren't getting in good positions in the final third. But like if the press isn't sharp in the middle, then all of a sudden there's switches and these guys like just people are out of position. And there can be switches and then you get in the final third. Luckily, I think all of our defenders are very good in the box. So that helps. But you don't want them to be in that position, right? Like you'd rather have them snuff out the danger before it gets into our box. So I think those are probably the vulnerabilities. It's just City's organization in the press and their build-up.
There's a lot to unpack there, Sam, but I want to start off by questioning. You just mentioned then the three defenders or whatever defenders are good in the box. And that's obviously, we've seen that a lot last year. We've seen maybe Pep transition from players like Laporte to players like Ake. He's brought Gvardiol in, who is great on the ball, but also great winning duels, whether they be ground duels, aerial duels. Ruben Diaz is obviously fantastic at winning ground duels, aerial duels. So is John Stones and Walker, despite having a poor game yesterday. He's usually good as well. Do you think that there's been sort of a shift then in Pep's approach to his defenders because he understands, as you just said, if we lose the ball in that area between the sort of Rodri and John Stones centre defensive midfield partnership, whoever it is, I need to have players behind there who may get one chance to put a tackle in or a block, and they need to be able to do that. Because for me, as much as I do love Laporte, I've got to say that probably is one area for me where he's probably slightly weaker on sort of the likes of Ake and John Stones in that sort of one-on-one defending. Do you think that Pep maybe has transitioned to sort of those players for that reason?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think Laporte, one of the things that hurt him is his pace, because Laporte can play here in the middle, but really this is where you want him. And if he's pushing up here, then he doesn't have the pace to get back compared to Ake or Gvardiol. I think that's why it was so important for Pep to get Gvardiol, because that is a shift in his philosophy. Like he doesn't want the like Jordi Alba fly up the wings and not as solid defensively type of players. He wants these guys who are wide to be more of like center back, full back hybrids, right? Where they can get up the field. They're generally not getting super high, but they can get up the field, but they're also proper defenders. And I think that's why Kyle Walker still works there, right? Because he can, like nominally in defense, we go from this 3-2 into like a 4-4-2, which we've done basically since Pep started. It kind of looks like this, right?
Yeah.
And when we do that, that means two people are going to be playing fullbacks, even if they're not fullbacks. They're going to be wide defenders. So he wants proper defenders there, but he doesn't want like the big, like he doesn't want Ruben Diaz out here, right? He wants them centrally. So these guys have to be almost like hybrids. They have to be versatile enough and pacey enough to play out there, which Walker is good at, Akanji is good at, even Stones can do. And then out here, Ake can do that. And Gvardiol is like perfect for that position, which is why he wanted it. So yeah, it's definitely a shift, because in years past, it was like Zinchenko or Cancelo. And he said, no, we're scrapping that. We'll be fine in our build-up. I want somebody who I want proper defenders.
Yeah, no, 100%. I completely agree with what you're saying, because something that for me, I think that maybe I'll simplify this, and clearly it's not as simple as this, but essentially, I think now he's got Haaland in the team, right? And we've got players like Foden, we've got players like Kevin De Bruyne, and obviously we might be getting Lucas Paqueta as well, who can create chances for Erling Haaland. I think that in a simplistic way, it's almost like we will probably create a couple of chances in the game, and with Haaland, he will probably take those chances. I just need to make sure that my defense doesn't fuck it up, which is over the years they have. You know, you look at Zinchenko, he's made mistakes. You look at Cancelo, he's made huge mistakes in big games. And I think that he's sort of, in a simplistic way, has just gone, no, I need players who can just defend. And I think that's probably one of the reasons maybe why Laporte has potentially struggled. In that midfield, Sam, sort of the midfield two of obviously Rodri and whoever steps in there, what is it that Phillips is lacking at the moment? I know obviously Rodri is far superior and therefore he's only really going to play when Rodri needs to be rested. But there's a big conversation online and obviously within the City sort of fan base at the moment about Kalvin Phillips, whether he should stay, whether he should go. What is he doing anything wrong? I know he's not getting that many minutes, so it's kind of difficult, but is he doing anything wrong that you can see when he gets on the pitch as to why he's not even getting on for 5 minutes at the end of football matches? The guy's bringing on Laporte, you know what I mean, and Cole Palmer and £40 million Kalvin Phillips can't get on. Is he doing anything wrong, or can you not see anything tactically that Kalvin Phillips is doing that's an issue?
Well, I know we have a limited sample size, so
that's the problem. That's another problem, yeah.
So, I mean, part of it, I mean, I think the limited sample size must come from training, right? Because if Pep doesn't see it in training, he's not going to play. So he must not be good enough in training, or else he'd be getting on the field a little more. In terms of what I've seen when he actually does come on, he's just not good enough in close quarters, right? Because the one thing you need from your number 6, like the one thing you need from Rodri, is to be able to receive the ball under pressure and take it out of pressure. Essentially, like either dribble away from a guy, shield somebody, and pass it off. Like you need them to be able to play under pressure in tight spaces. That's number 1, right? That's what Fernandinho was really good at, and he was powerful. That's what Rodri was good at, and he was powerful. So that's number 1. It's that, and number 2 is they got to kind of snuff out danger on the defensive end, like in counterattacks. We talked about tactical fouls forever, or just like kind of being in the right space, and that was kind of Rodri's problem in the beginning. Is everybody used to say like, this guy's too slow, he can't get there in time. Well, it's more of just recognizing when to go, because he's still slow. Rodri's doesn't have he's not the quickest, but he's just always in the right place, and that's kind of part of it. So I think that's kind of Phillips' problem, is he seems to just not be good enough receiving the ball under pressure, but also seems to just be a little slower or not in the right place. Because if you're not in the right place, your pace can make up for it. That was kind of like Fernandinho's thing. Is he wasn't always in the right place, but he was so powerful and had so much pace it didn't matter. Phillips doesn't have that power or pace, so he needs to kind of be in the right place. And it is a really hard position to learn, but that's my guess as to why he doesn't play, because Pep just doesn't trust him. Clearly.
That was so funny then when you said Rodri's he's still slow. I mean, you know what? It's funny. It's such a basic statement, but it is actually true. The guy's just not magically got a lot faster. He's just learned the position. He's learned, as you say, when to go, when not to go. He sniffs out danger. He knows maybe when to hold his position, and he knows the positions to be. So there's maybe two sort of questions in one here. So can Phillips learn that? Because as you said, Rodri learned it. Can Phillips learn that? And if the answer to that is yes, he can learn it, is the only way of him learning that by actually playing football matches? And therefore, because he's not playing football matches, will he therefore not learn it?
I mean, you got to learn it in training. And I am skeptical on whether he will, because even in Rodri's first year, he played a ton of minutes. And I know that was out of necessity. Laporte got injured. We didn't have a center back, so he was just kind of thrown in there, and he had to be. But everyone who's learning gets a decent amount. Like even Grealish in his first year got minutes. Mahrez in his first year got minutes. And those guys were not near their best. But they still got minutes, which means Pep still trusted them. And we'll see it this year. Like if Paquetá and Doku come in, like, they're going to get plenty of minutes, and it's going to be their first year, and they're not going to be at their best because we know it takes time. Pep's system. So the fact that even in his second year, he's not even getting subbed on in games that are some of the least important throughout this year, then that tells me that Pep just doesn't trust him, and Pep clearly didn't trust him. Like in games that weren't really super important last year, Pep still didn't trust him. So that tells me that Pep probably doesn't trust him, and that it's, at least from my perspective, I don't think it's going to change.
Well, I agree. It's a sad, it's a sad situation in my view, but I do agree. I don't think Pep Guardiola trusts Kalvin Phillips enough to play in that position. And my take on this, Sam, is this: is Kalvin Phillips a good player? Yes. Could he be a good enough player for Manchester City? Maybe. No one can say. No one's got a crystal ball. But in my opinion, for Kalvin Phillips to play for Manchester City, he needs to play well. But in my view, for him to play well, he needs to play a lot of football. And he's not going to play a lot of football at Manchester City because he's not playing well. So I don't think it's going to work out for him there, but it will be interesting. Let's have a look at Sevilla then for the final few minutes of the stream before you get off. Hopefully you're not falling asleep. Just a reminder for the people that are in the stream, Sam got up at 5:30 to do this stream, man. So massive thank you, bro. Why don't you tell us some of your thoughts on last night's game? In particular, I'd like to know your thoughts on Kovacic, Foden. There was a real lack of creativity there. Was it that they were just poor? Was it the system? What's your take on the lack of creativity yesterday? Because it was a real issue.
So I thought Foden was probably a little more poor than Kovacic, because Kovacic, like, he has played a deep lying midfielder forever. Like, he doesn't play in the final third. I remember when I first did a scouting report on him, like, his touches in the box were very little, right? So, because when he played under Thomas Tuchel, he was playing in a double pivot. He played under Sarri before that, and it was very similar. And I'm not surprised that I think he's done very well so far. But in terms of how they played, so in the first half, it was Kovacic out left and Foden out right. And I think the problem here was there was nobody to exploit the space in behind, right? Because Kovacic is right-footed, Foden's left-footed. Like, Foden doesn't want to get in behind here because then he's got to go on his weak foot to get the ball somewhere. And same with Kovacic. And Kovacic is just a little more uncomfortable getting in behind. I think that's just going to take him some time. And against, like, Sevilla parked the bus yesterday. So against a team like that, you either need the threat in behind from your wingers, which Grealish and Palmer, you're not going to have that threat. And if you don't have it from there, then you need it from these guys. And usually it's De Bruyne here and Bernardo here. And Bernardo with his left foot goes in behind. Bernardo with his left foot goes in behind. De Bruyne, we've seen it a million times where it runs into here, puts in his cross, right? So I think that's why Pep switched it in the second half. So he moved Foden out to the left and Kovacic out to the right. And Kovacic is more comfortable on the left. But I think that's why it kind of worked a little better, because even if they don't make those runs all the time, there's at least the threat of it. And the threat of it also, remember, like, Sevilla played a back four. So that means if these guys are pressed up and running in behind, that means a midfielder has to go follow them. That creates a little more space, and we saw that a lot. I think that did that result in the goal? But it resulted in chances because this guy would run, Walker would step up, or Rodri would be here, and either this guy would cut in, he would get in behind, or he would kind of pass it back to these guys, and these guys could put him. Yeah, that's what happened on this side.
Yeah.
Is that here, and then this guy runs, Rodri steps up, ball comes here, and then Rodri is on the edge of the box with this, and the ball goes to the back.
Yeah. My take on that then is, Because I agree, obviously, like you said, Kovacic is not really the type of guy to get goals and assists. He's not a creator. He's keeps the game ticking over. He retains possession very well. He can carry the team up the pitch with some drives and some dribbles. But then his job then is right. I've done my job. Who wants the ball to create the chance? So for me, because of course we need to discuss this because obviously Kevin De Bruyne's out till 2024, and right at this moment in time we don't have Lucas Paqueta. And I think that obviously Bernardo comes back, which should be back because he's only ill, should be back. He's probably going to be playing right wing. Should we not therefore focus on putting Phil Foden in his most optimal position to create chances? Because out of the two, because I just don't see Kovacic creating chances wherever you put him. So for me, you need to put Foden where he's going to create chances. And that's why I said, if I'll just share my screen quickly here, Sam, when I was doing the preview, you obviously have Grealish over here, Palmer over here. You got your Rodri there, Kovacic here. I was saying, could we? I don't know, and obviously you can maybe pick this out and see if there's a potential flaw in my plan here. But could you not just say to Kovacic, you just sort of stay in this sort of region here and give Foden a sort of a free role? Because remember David Silva? David Silva used to sort of just run this channel here. And he just go wherever he kind of wanted to go. And maybe under certain managers or in certain games, he might have had a more fixed position, whether it be out on the right or whether it be out on the left. But more often than not, he was basically allowed to go anywhere in this channel. Could we play that with Foden, or would that then result in some sort of system vulnerability if we did that?
It's possible. I think the one thing with Kovacic, so let me go back to my board. Okay. So the one thing with Kovacic is he is good with the through balls. So he might not be the best in the final third yet, but like when you're building up, so if you're building up and he's kind of receiving the ball in this area, there was a couple times yesterday where he would attempt the through balls back behind for Holland.
Yeah, he did do that.
And I think he's good at that. He's tried it before too, which is good. I'd rather have somebody who's trying those. So he's a good passer and he can create things. But yeah, I mean, generally that's what we saw last year too with Gundogan. Like Gundogan isn't the dynamic like Kevin De Bruyne type of playmaker. Gundogan was just really good at arriving in the box, so that kind of makes up for it, right? So Kovacic is kind of playing that Gundogan role, and just like not arriving as much in the box. Whereas, like, because you need like kind of one more controlling midfielder and one more dynamic one, and Foden fits the dynamic role, and in Kovacic fits the more controlling one. So there's things that can happen. Like it could even be where Kovacic comes down and plays next to Rodri. But it wouldn't surprise me that Kovacic kind of plays a little deeper and Foden plays right off of Holland, because that's what we saw from Kevin De Bruyne last year a lot. Like if you look at Kevin De Bruyne's average positioning, like you'll see these a lot in my threads, because like Kevin De Bruyne might be, a midfielder, but if you look at average positioning, it's like Kevin De Bruyne and Holland are right next to each other.
Yeah. It's almost like they played as strikers together at times.
Yeah, it's almost like he's a second striker. So it wouldn't surprise me to see a lot more of that this year from Foden. And Foden needs to do it, honestly. It's not just we should see it more. It's that now that De Bruyne's out, like this is Foden's time to shine, because he's the most dynamic midfielder we have.
100%. Just before we wrap up, because I know you need to go. Formidable Centurions in the chat says, "Can Jack not play in the middle?" What do you think on that? Have you seen enough from him?
I'm sure he could, but clearly Pep doesn't want him to. Like he loves him out on the wing, and he does his job out on the wing too.
Yeah.
That's part of it too. Is like Pep wants something specific from a winger, and Jack does that well. And I think too, like Jack has turned out to be very, very good in that arena, right? And so why would you want to move him? It's kind of like, I go back to when somebody asked Jurgen Klopp one time, like, why don't you play Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield? And he said, why would I put one of the best right backs in the world in midfield? Now, that's changed, obviously, for them. But that's kind of my point, is like, why why would you take like one of our best wingers? And we're already short on wingers. So why would you take one of our best wingers and
I
put
hear
him
that.
into midfield?
100%. 100%. I hear that. Is there anything else that you wanted to go through, bro, before we wrapped up?
I think we covered a lot of stuff. I thought that was very good.
Bro, it was honestly one of the most interesting streams I've ever done, man. 100%, 100%. And I'd love to do some more of these shows, bro. Because that for me, and I will just probably just peck your head and just ask you bare questions in these streams. Because I love it, man. I love the sort of tactical side of the game, and I sort of have like a basic understanding of tactics, but you know, I'm humble enough to know that there's a lot more people out there that are way more advanced in terms of tactical sort of stuff. And I love your stuff on Twitter, man. But let people know who are watching live and on the replay where they can find you on Twitter and obviously your podcast as well, man.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Citizen America. Name's American Citizen. You can also find our podcast, the Pep Talk podcast, on basically every streaming platform, Spotify, Apple, wherever. We're also on Twitter, the Pep Talk podcast. So you can find us there.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Listen, it's been a great show. Hopefully we can do some more of these. And guys, massively appreciate Sam for coming on today at 5:30 in the morning, getting up. For you in the States, yeah, obviously American citizens. You know what it is? It's because what's the other guy called? Blue City Brain. What's his name?
Jason.
Jason. He's in Australia, right?
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So is it just you two on the podcast then?
Yeah, it's just us two. We'll probably start having some guests more, but our podcast is fairly new, so we want to kind of establish ourselves.
You were nominated, by the way. Did you see that?
I did see that
in our end of year nominations, bro. You was on the nominations. So yeah, man, I'll give it a listen, man. I give it a listen. Do you talk about like the tactical side of the game on the podcast, or is it sort of more just sort of relaxed, chilled?
It's generally more relaxed, chilled. Sometimes we get into the tactical stuff, and that's kind of why I started doing more tactic sports stuff. And for the Pep Talk, we might start doing more videos like that as well, because it's just easier when you have a visual. It's hard to talk about like tactical and especially positioning and stuff. It's hard to do that on a podcast.
No, 100%, 100%. Well, there you go, guys. Make sure you go check him out. I've actually linked your Twitter in the description, so guys, go follow him. Genuinely, like, I'm not even just saying this. It is honestly a great account. He knows what he's talking about, and yeah, go check him out. Listen, Sam, thank you very much for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Hopefully, you guys liked this stream. If you did, and you're watching back on replay, then let me know in the comments section below, and maybe we can do some more of these. Make sure you drop a like on the stream as well. Subscribe to the channel, guys, as well if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. See you in a bit.